morning, Grandview. Here are your announcements for the week of Sunday, September 8th. Love JC is an area-wide day of service happening Saturday, September 21st. Thanks to all who have signed up for this event of service. If you have any questions, you can head to the Life at Grandview table and a staff member will be happy to help. Our fall focus is kicking off this week. If you're interested in joining a canopy, please head to the Life at Grandview table for more information. 2 for 2 got off to a great start last week, but there's still room for you. You can find out more info on our Church Center app or at the Life at Grandview table. Our mission of the month for September is Meredith McKinney. She works with Roots in Scotland. You can find out more in the newsletter each week. You've heard us talking about the Life at Grandview table and our Church Center app. These are excellent ways to find out more information about what's going on and how you can get plugged in. And now, you're in the know.
Whatever you carry, I invite you to bring yourself in honesty and authenticity, because we believe that God sees that and accepts that, and that's a good way to come to worship. So I invite you to sing with us.
I've never been sorrows deep I call. When my hope is shaken, torn and ruined from the fall, hear my desperation. For so long I've bled and prayed, God come to my rescue. Even so the thorn remains.
enough. This is from Proverbs 8. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago I was set up, at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth, when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth. When he had not yet made earth and fields, or the world's first bits of soil, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him, like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the human race. This is the word of the Lord.
Now we'll have a short greeting time, so you can move around and say hi to people or get some coffee, and we'll call you back in a minute for a time of prayer.
This is This is your 30-second warning. Please find an end to your conversation as natural as can be and find your way back to your seats. 30 seconds.
Good morning. Let's pray. God of love and infinite power, we gather today seeking and carrying many things. We hunger for peace, knowledge, justice, connection, and for answers to our deepest questions. And though we do not always find exactly what we're seeking, if we are open to it, we sense your presence through it all. You whisper to us and breathe life into us when we have the wind knocked out of us, or our breath is quickened by our fears and anxieties. Help us to listen closely for your voice of comfort, wisdom, and love. Let us hear you clearly when you speak to us through your word, your spirit, and for those around us that you have chosen to remind us of your presence. And as we go through our days that are but a vapor and quickly fading, you fill them with significance, even if we can't always see it. You place resources within our grasp and long for us to use them to bless others. Forgive us when we hold them too tightly. Our days on earth are numbered, but they are also marked with meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. Let us be people who take each moment and use them to the best of our ability for your glory and for the benefit of our fellow humans. Help us not to take for granted the time we have been given. Forgive us when we hoard our time and treasure. We confess that we cannot do this on our own. Our hearts are greedy and selfish. But by gathering here today, we acknowledge that we believe that there is a better way to live, that by placing you at the center of our lives and of our life together, there is value beyond this passing day. We come before you together once again, asking for peace for the dying, comfort for the hurting, food for the hungry. We long for the end of war, anger, grief, and loneliness. We pray that we never again hear that there has been a mass shooting. God, we pray for an end to these horrors. We pray that we will play the role you have set before us in bringing your kingdom into reality here and now. Fill us with the breath of heaven so that we might be people who are driven by love. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, buckle up. This one's going to be a little longer than most scripture readings. This is the story of creation from Genesis 1 and the beginning of Genesis 2. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky, and there was evening, and there was morning the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky." So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves of every kind, with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished in all their multitude. And on the seventh day God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. This is the word of the Lord.
Well, good morning, friends. Thank you for your patience and attention as we read just about all of Genesis 1. And part of what we're doing in this series, I'll just give you a heads up, next week we're going to get to read the second creation story in Genesis, and partly just so that we can say out loud and remember that there are two. And so that you can be one less person to sometimes get surprised by that. But in any case, I a little bit want you to know a hard thing I did last week. I was looking at the sermon. I was a little nervous about how long it was. And then I made this hard, and of course, I've just written all these beautiful, amazing paragraphs, and it's really hard to just let them go by the wayside, but duty calls. And they're not that good anyway. And so I did a really hard thing last week, and I let a paragraph go that I just thought had to go away. But then, working on this one this week, I got to bring it back a little bit, which has made me really glad. So sorry in advance if it was bad enough to not make it last week. Maybe it shouldn't just make it this week. In any case, I didn't write any of that down. That shouldn't have been my intro. But I'll never forget 6 or 7 years ago, an evening I got to spend on the grassy ridge out just past the first balds at Roan Mountain. You got to hike past where everyone comes in from out of town to take pictures with their iPads. You walk past that place and you keep going on the Appalachian Trail a little bit. And if you've only been to the first bald, that's okay. But you can know that if you are looking to the east, or kind of as you come up, just kind of over the bald this way, as you're coming up into the view, this big ridge that fills the sky in that direction. It's called the Grassy Ridge, and it's one of my favorite places in the whole world. And I've been there quite a bit. But this one evening sticks in my mind as different than the others. It just was one of those late summer, early fall evenings where something about the sunset and the air and the clouds just turned everything golden in this unbelievable way that was somehow a light that was affecting everything, and yet also something like a substance, almost felt like a liquid that was flowing in and around us, and kind of the things that we were seeing with one another, and the hollers and the mountains as they rolled down into North Carolina before our eyes, and we just could do nothing but stand and marvel, just the two of us in the whole entire world. It was amazing. This world, this creation, this place where we are is splendid sometimes, isn't it? Chance to be alive in a place like this is sometimes just so lovely. But you've also seen those pictures of the houses that used to be built by the beach that are now being unbuilt by the ocean. Or maybe you've seen, I recently learned about a village in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, a village that was built and established but then had to be abandoned in the 80s because the wind patterns had shifted and the village is just being buried in sand as the desert is shifting and moving, and there's nothing they could do to prevent their town from being swallowed by the desert. This is to say nothing of earthquakes or other kinds of storms or tsunamis or landslides. Rather than a splendid place to be alive, sometimes nature, this place where we live, is something of a threat to our structures, to some kind of safety, some kind of part of human life. Or perhaps think about the way that we depend upon oil and minerals, produce, farmland, timber, the wind, water in the world. Energy and food, all kinds of products and more are extracted in different ways from the earth, often at great cost. But what an incredible repository of resources that are here as a part of this world that support human life, that support civilization and culture. Still others will sing songs this week to personify, to give a voice to the world. I've been thinking this week, I know some of you appreciate Gregory Alan Isakov. He's got this gorgeous, haunting, beautiful song about the universe, and he sings that she's like a wounded companion who is still yet beautiful. It's a gorgeous song. And it perhaps then raises the question for us, what are we to say about this world, about nature? Is it nature? Is it a place? Is it a resource? Is it a companion? What kind of thing are we talking about when we talk about the world? And it may not come as a surprise to you to know that our answer, how we answer that question, it depends on the stories we tell. It depends on the stories we tell, how we come to understand what this world is. Because, of course, people have been telling stories about the world and its beginnings for as long as we have had language. when I got to teach at Milligan, or when I got to study Old Testament, we always spend valuable time exploring the basic contours, not just of the Genesis creation stories, but Babylonian and Sumerian, Egyptian stories about the foundation of the world that predate some of our even language conventions. And sometimes these stories on the face of them can seem wildly different, or sometimes there's surprising overlap or similarity. It remains the case that as a people, there's something about us as humans that is powerfully drawn toward the beginning, about the way that what is came to be. And of course, what that has to do with God and you and me. Of course, we have these ancient stories that maybe include a host of different characters. We also have a story that's being told, and some have really committed to telling this story in more recent days of the world's causation and formation without any extra characters, without the presence or work of God. And this is, of course, another way to fashion a kind of origin story. And it's the stories we tell that will shape our understanding of this place, of our lives, of this world. We love an origin story, don't we? I've never been to film school myself, but from my uneducated perspective, it seems like step one for managing the success of any blockbuster film is to go ahead and immediately begin planning for a sequel that is actually a prequel, right? That's your next move. When your movie hits the big time, just go ahead and plan on the prequel. The origin story of the hero or the villain or the world. You can choose, actually. All of those are options. We've learned. We've got a fascination with these in some way. And sometimes I wonder, that's a curious sort of fascination that we have. And I think it's partly because we have an innate sense in us that in a good story, in a story that is well told, there is an integrity. There's a structure that holds all parts of the story together, however much of the story we know. That even if we hear the middle of a story first, that we could discover in an appropriate beginning that there was groundwork, there were character traits or settings or plot that would have a credible influence on what would come. Because a good story is like this. It has a good structure. It has integrity, an interrelationship, and a consistency between the parts. This is not at all to say that a good story needs to be predictable, that it needs to be obvious. Sometimes that's the joy and delight of a good story, when exactly the thing that seemed least likely becomes the thing that makes the most sense somehow. That's an amazing kind of story. As you may have noticed, or maybe you remember from last week or any of the other gatherings at the church over the last week or so, we are today beginning week 2 of Grandview's Meta Fall Focus. Is calling it Meta because across Sunday mornings, our Canopy small groups that meet throughout the week, and 2 for 2 on Wednesday nights, we're working to give our attention to our story, to our meta narrative. The big picture story of God in the world, the story that is large and sturdy enough to give a framework, to give an orientation to all of our smaller stories, of our own lives, of our own experiences, of the experience and life of this community. The meta-narrative is the one that could give structure and meaning and purpose. If you haven't yet heard about these things, or if you haven't yet taken a step, this is the best time to get connected here at Grandview. Evan and Macy have been working to make sure there are groups available for you to join in conversation, to wonder about and to ask questions about, to consider what this framework for our shared life together is like. And now is a great time. After service, you can talk with them at the Life at Grandview table to get questions answered about a way that you could connect with this story and connect with this community in a new way. Last week, we began by looking at the end of the story. We said we wanted to begin with the end in mind, and at the end, we see this fulfillment of our longing and hope that the presence of God will be with humankind, that there is an eternal horizon of hope for which we long and for which we were made. And so today, in week 2, we turn to the beginning of the story. We ask how our beginning is taking shape, and then we'll ask, if this is to be a good story, what does living with integrity in this story look like? What would it look like to live a good story from this kind of beginning? Because I think that's part of what is at stake in this whole meta-series. That we want to get the story right so we have a sense of how to live with integrity as a part of this story as it unfolds in the world. Because if the only story we have about the world is just a place to be sometimes, or if the only story we have about the world is just a reservoir of resources for human consumption, or if the only story we have about the world is a persistent threat to be neutralized, if those are the only stories that we can tell, then these kinds of beginnings are going to each enable or empower different ways of living or imagining that I'm not sure will be in line, that would live with integrity in the way that God has made the world. And so our metaphors, our stories matter because they shape our lives and our actions, our understandings. And so we're here to give careful attention to the stories we tell about the world. The world is here. We are in it. We saw it on our way. We were cold because of it on our way in this morning, and we'll be warm again as we take our jackets back off as we leave. And yet, the fact of its existence isn't and has not been enough for us humans over the millennia. We want to know and ask what it means. We want to ask why, and how should we live in light of this world? And as it happens, I think these are also the questions that the Hebrew poets in Genesis give us. I think these are the same questions that are being wondered about and asked in Genesis. I think when we read or approach these texts in an effort to try and ask what really happened, or to try and approach these texts as a way to explain the mechanics of planet formation or plate tectonics or flora and fauna taxonomies, I think we could, I know, that would be a wild question, wouldn't it, Jack? These are the kinds of questions that would put us in a position to ask these text questions they're probably not interested in answering for us. And it would be to receive answers that these texts are not giving to us. And further, to approach these texts in this way would, I think, be to miss the invitation that the texts are providing. Because these magnificent poems at the start of the book of Genesis, as the beginning of the story of our life together, are not science. I'm not even sure they're really history. They're not even necessarily an account of what happened. They are more interested in something and someone more beautiful, someone more capacious, someone more generous than just an account of a sequence of events. The story of creation in Genesis 1, the story of darkness and light and sky and sea and giraffes and rivers and all that is, it wraps around us and it tells us the story of the splendors and the glories and the depths of the world. And so we approach this beginning to tell the story of creation. But first, we're going to wonder about the Creator, the one from whom and through whom and for whom all things were made. The psalmists claim that the heavens, the stars, the rocks, the mountains, and more all declare the glory of this Creator. And so that's where we will begin. And then that's where I think these texts point us. God created the heavens and the earth. God is the one who dreams and plans and does. And in creation itself, we stand to learn about God, the Creator. And we know that's how it works, isn't it? We know that art and artists are related. You know the kind of disappointment when a song you like turns out to be by someone who's just weird or even worse. You know that kind of odd feeling, or you know the way that it feels when you discover that Viggo Mortensen didn't use a stunt double for the horse scenes, and it helps you love Aragorn in The Lord of the Rings even more than you knew you did. There's an amazing connection between art and artist, and I think that's what we get to discover and explore in the texts of Genesis. We're not just seeing the account of creation, but we are seeing the Creator at work, God's nature, God's character on display. We ought not to get too far into the text before stopping to consider the fundamental claim of this story that we share, this story we tell, that God created the heavens and the earth. God created them. Our story begins with God's decisive action to create and bring about what did not yet exist, bringing forth light and darkness, to bring forth the very greatest and the very smallest by God's intent and purpose and creation. The poem itself sets out an orderly structure. First darkness and light, then waters and sky, then land separated from water. And then God begins to fill the land and the sea with vegetation, and then the skies, with filling the skies with lights for day and night. And then God begins to fill this world with teeming bounty of animal life. And then finally, God creates humankind. And there at the end of the sixth day, God beholds it all and says, "It is very good." In an orderly and purposeful fashion, our story is that God has made the world, structuring it for the sake of the moment when God could perceive it all and beholding it say, "This is very good." Each day in the narration of the poem includes an increasing amount of detail and precision that reflects the increasing and infinite complexity of creation and the beautiful interdependence of it all. Not just night and day, but evening and morning. I think that's lovely to think about them coming together. Not just plants, but seeds and fruit. Not just creatures, but their means of becoming fruitful, of multiplying. The creation account in Genesis 1 describes the order and the intelligibility, the purposefulness, the goodness, not just of creation, but of the Creator. There was nothing, and then God created. There was God, and then there was a world that God made that was not God. A world that was different and varied, full of life and full of diversity and dependence. And it was very good. It is very good. And I think it begs the question in our story, as all good stories do, they prompt questions in us. The question for me is why? What could have prompted such an action, such a creative process on God's behalf? I think this is another example where the story we tell matters a lot for how it shapes our understanding. That God created, ordered, and called this world good, this world that was different and other than God, this world that was precisely not God. And in this, I think we see an essential part of the nature and character of God. God who is eternally three in one, God who is perfect and loving communion and fellowship. God did not need something other than God to enjoy fellowship, to enjoy communion. Theologians observe how the story of creation is not at all a story of compulsion. There's not an external necessity that forced God's hand to make the world. God wasn't lacking. God wasn't lonely. There was no deficiency in God before the act of creation. And then also, as the ordered account displays, our story of creation is not one that is haphazard or accidental, but filled with meaning and intent and purpose. And so part of how we talk about this in our story is that God did not create by necessity or by accident. Instead, the story we tell is that creation is an act that is perfectly fitting for God. This is the act that is perfectly appropriate for who God is. Cornelius Plantinga, who has helped us through his book to structure this series, calls creation God's way of enlarging the realm of being in order to make room for more and varied relationship. William Robinson says that this is the heart of God's intent in creation, is God's bid for fellowship with all things. That creation for God is the possibility and the invitation to a new kind of relationship that was not otherwise possible. And this is where our story of creation begins, with a creator who is good and well-ordered and who seeks and desires communion with others. And because we remember that we are working to tell and to discover a good story, if not a predictable one, we are bound to wonder what it would look like to live with integrity, to live as an integrated part with a story that begins like that. To say that God made all that is and that God called it good in a well-ordered act of creation invites us to live as a part of something that we didn't make. And that includes our own lives. That our world and our very lives are given to us by God despite whatever the self-made men will proclaim or offer to sell you on their podcasts. And further, to say that God created the heavens and the earth in a good and intelligible manner opens all the world as a resource for learning and for knowing God. For centuries, Christians have referred to the Scriptures alongside what many have called the book of nature as a way to learn and know God. And this goes for us too, I think. The book of nature is a way to learn about the world, to learn about the creator of the world that we experience and know. And like any book, we shouldn't expect to just automatically know what it says or be able to find it perfectly obvious and clear all the time. It isn't to say that the world just is God or that any thoughts that anyone has ever had while being outside are equally helpful to help us learn about God. But to talk about the book of nature is to say that through attention to the world and life that God has made, through the humility that it takes to learn and study, that we can discover that indeed all of creation is singing the praises of God who has made the world. Sometimes in sermons we try and give a clear action item. Sometimes it's not always as clear, I confess. But today, perhaps a clear action item for us is simply this: what would it look like to pay attention today or this week? What would it look like to be amazed or intrigued about the world? To give something in the world your attention. You maybe have heard, and I know that some of you have reposted, that lovely Mary Oliver poem, Instructions for Living a Life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. That's a lovely poem that might be something like an action item for today, as we consider the beginning of our story, as we consider the Creator who stands at the beginning. I think we receive in this story a magnificent invitation, a magnificent instruction to be drawn into this story that begins with creation. And not just the creation of you and me, not just all humans, but of all things in a beautiful and interdependent fabric of creation. As we consider what it would look like to pay attention to this kind of world, to be open to how God is present and at work, and how our experience and study of creation invites us to learn about the Creator, it's worth thinking about the practice of attention for a little bit. Simone Weil says that we often mischaracterize attention as a kind of muscle, as kind of an effort of the will. She writes about the way that if you were to ask a group of kids to pay attention, that you would see their brows furrow and maybe their shoulders hunch, kind of with an effort or an understanding that by their muscular contractions they might be more able to pay attention. And she says that attention is much more like openness. That attention is much less an effort of power than it is the result of a practiced awareness to the people and world around us. And that's part of the invitation today, my friends. To hear and to remember and to hope that you are part of a good creation, that you are good in the midst of it, and you are invited to pay attention and discover that God, who is good, is at work in all of it. That through our attention we might learn to love the world, that we might learn to love creation and to learn how the ice caps and the bacteria in the world and physics shape our lives, they shape our world. That we might look with confidence at the mountains and at the coming changing of the seasons and know that they too are part of what God has made good, and that they too, like us, are dependent on God's good creation and sustenance. To pay attention would be to see your friends and your family, your neighbors, perhaps your mirror first thing in the morning, and to see in all of these places the image of God, the imprint and the pattern and the life of God. To perceive this is a great and mysterious gift that stands to transform our perspectives, our ethics, our politics, our relationships, our lives, our community. And friends, this of course cannot mean that everything we perceive, that everything we experience from ourselves or in others is good and well ordered. We know that, don't we? We come even here on a sunny day bearing strain and stress and worry and difficulty and pain. It's so often that our lives and our relationships, our environment itself, that our politics, that we bear the strain of what is not good, of what is not well ordered. And this is not something for us to avoid or overlook in our attempt to try and say that God has made the world good. We can't avoid what is not good now. But to begin our story in this way gives us the resources and the hope to say that however creation and history unfold, we will always be living in a story that begins with God who has made all things good. This good creation by this good creator is the beginning of our hope that one day everything will be redeemed. That one day everything will be restored to God's good intent. And if you know something of our story that we will continue to tell, that this comes at a cost. Because from the very beginning, for the sake of love and communion, God made a world that is not God. God made a world that will not always choose to share in the eternal and perfect loving communion of the triune God. From the very beginning, creation is a story of vulnerability and responsibility. Creation is a story of a willingness to suffer for the sake of love. And if you know the story that we will continue to tell, you know that that kind of beginning continues to have integrity in the rest of our story. That continues to be the way that God's life is in the world. And that continues to be a pattern into which we are invited to live. God is always the one who is seeking communion. God is the one who created the world for the sake of love, and God is the one who is still creating to bring about the flourishing and the communion of all things. And this is the God who made the world, and this is the God in whose image you are made. We are made. It is a good image. And it is an image that calls us to learn to love one another, to learn to love the world, to give of ourselves on behalf of one another. And so it makes me wonder what kind of story we might tell about the world, about this realm of creation. Whether it's a place, a threat, a resource, a companion, an environment. I think there are maybe some ways that all of these are appropriate metaphors and stories to have and tell. But I think today, here at the beginning of the story, as we give attention to the meta-narrative that shapes all of our stories, I wonder what it would be like to notice and recognize the world and the act of creation as a gift. As a gift from a giver that not only makes sense, but a gift that displays and demonstrates the character of the giver. One who is always inviting into relationship and hope and communion together. This is the story we bear. This is the story that shapes us. This is the story that shapes whatever will come next. And so with this story in mind, we sing the words of that beautiful hymn that Luke has pulled, even the original 19th century words for us. For the beauty of the earth, we offer our sacrifice of praise to Christ our God as we witness and pay attention to all of creation. Let's pray together. Gracious God, for the beauty of the earth, we seek to give you praise, joining our voices and attentions and hopes with all that you have made, to learn and meet and understand you as the one who made all things in love and for the sake of love. We ask that you'd be with us. Help us to notice. Help us to trust your story. In Christ's name, amen.
We're now at our time of communion. So whenever you're ready, you can come forward and get the elements. Nathan and Heather will serve you. Once you have the elements, or you can come to either side of the table, and once you have the elements, you can return around the pillars so that we keep a nice flow going. If you need gluten-free bread, that's in the center plate there, and you can take that and dip it yourself so that no gluten contaminates across. As we prepare to eat this meal, I invite you to read this liturgy with me. This is the part of our worship where we culminate and come together at Jesus' table. In communion, the loaf and cup help us reflect on the history of our tradition in the Last Supper. Communion is a practice where we get to come face to face with a member of our community and be reminded that we are in this together. By receiving communion from another Christ follower, we are reminded that we are recipients of Christ's grace. Jesus set this table with space for all who call themselves followers of Jesus. It is not a table for those who are deserving, as we know Jesus was ridiculed for the inclusivity of his table. It is a table where we all can find life. On the same night that Jesus was betrayed and arrested, leading to his crucifixion, he ate this meal with his followers. We follow the same teaching and example he left with them, and that the global church has followed since. As Jesus did, we give thanks and break this bread as a representation of Jesus' body broken for us. We take and drink of the cup as a representation of the blood that poured from Jesus' body, shed for us. When we eat and drink this together, we are coming together as the no matter what family that God made us through Jesus. And together we remember his death, we proclaim his resurrection, and we await his return to us. You can come take when you're ready. service, if there's any kind of response you want to make to the message, or you just want to know more about our community here at City View, or if you just need prayer for something, then Nathan and Heather will be in the back of the sanctuary and would love to talk to you about any of those things or pray for you, whatever it is that you need. And I invite you to stand as we'll sing our last song. You can take any posture you like.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonders of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship, so will I can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning star, a signifier of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. If the wind goes where you send it, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. If the sum of all our praises still fall shy, then we'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, you chase down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned
Well, it's been good to worship together and to declare together that the God who created the world is still in the business of recreating. Welcome back, kids, and it's good to have you with us as well. If you came prepared to give today, there's some ways on the screen that you can do that. We don't give out of a sense of obligation, but we give as a part and as an extension of worshiping with our whole lives. 2 for 2, that's our intergenerational worship service, kicked off this past week, but there's still time to get involved. It's happening throughout the months of September and October. It meets on Wednesdays from 5:30 to 7:30, and there are lots of ways that you can get plugged in and attend and or serve with that. There's also still opportunities to join a canopy or a small group. Some of you all have gotten personal communication about that. But if you haven't and want to get plugged in anyway, let me or Macy know. We'll both be at the Life at Grandview table after the service. Come talk to us. We'd love to get you plugged into one of those. We'll have our second Tuesday hangout this week at the Garby's house. That's Max, he's a Garby, and Teresa's a Garby, and Jim's a Garby. We're going to be at their house just having some fun. What? Chloe, I'm sorry, Chloe. And there are other ones too, but those are the ones that are here. And we'll be at their house, and that will be from 6:30 to 8:30. We'll just be hanging out at their house. Check out Nathan's email for the address there, or talk to someone who's in the know. Talk to one of them for the address. For more info on any of that, Macy and I will be at the Life of Grandview table, as I said, and we'd love to get you plugged into the life of the church or any of those events that are happening. Another special announcement, this Friday, some members of our church, Michelle Ramstrand, who's here, and Jamie Caraway have organized an event to gather and pray. It's a time of nonpartisan prayer for the upcoming election. That'll be from 7 to 8:30 this Friday, and if you want more information on that, you can find Michelle and ask her about that. With that, let's stand together to receive the benediction. Go from here in the love of God, the grace we find in Christ Jesus, and in the fellowship of the Holy Spirit. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.